Morning, everyone. Sabah al-khair. You guys awake? Let's see, maybe we can make this a little more interesting. Thank you for inviting me to speak. Great to be with you. Marty, I don't have any prepared remarks. I wanted to hear a little bit of what others wanted to say and not be repetitive. And really what I'm sharing with you is based on my personal experiences. Number one, I was born in Syria. I grew up in Damascus. We immigrated when I was a teenager to the US. So I'm really a product of both worlds. And I also worked in government on national security. I served for 10 years at the US Department of State. And I had a number of roles, including I was the chief of staff of the US Embassy in Baghdad. I was the main liaison with the Syrian opposition during the early years of the revolution. And I was the senior advisor to US Ambassador to the United Nations Samantha Power on the Middle East. And I've had a chance to see really the formulation of US policy at the working level and at the senior level. I've drawn my own conclusions that are continuously evolving about why does the United States do what it does in the world. And really it comes down to a very simple conclusion. For me, it's people. When we say the United States does, or the United States should do, what we really are saying is people need to do X. And I'll come back to this point and what that means for those of us who care about reform, good governance, accountability, combating corruption, and true human development in the Arab world, a region of 450 million people, right? Which seems to remain as an exception to the drive toward bringing more accountable governance to the world and respect for human rights. These are things you all know. US policy is generally driven by legacy issues in the Arab world, whether it is a desire to protect the state of Israel, to work with the state of Israel, to keep Israel has a more competitive advantage over its neighbors, but also, access and the free flow of energy, not just to the US, but to the global markets, right? Including Japan, for example, is important to the US, South Korea, other parts of the world. Geographically, the region is important for obvious reasons, so having this region be stable and not a source of conflict is important. But also more recently, relatively speaking, is the legacy of 9/11 and the war on terror. So combating terrorism, preventing it from emerging, or at least mitigating against it. Not having another 9/11 happen under the watch of any future president is a real thing. And that's something that drives and informs a lot of the decision making that you've seen and you'll continue to see. But also there's culture. I go back to people. By culture, I mean the way the region is seen, perceived, and thought about. And that's going to be informed by the personal experiences of the people making the decisions. Again, it's a simple concept, but it's very powerful. So when I was in government, all too often in national security meetings, usually these were mid-level meetings, but I was on the sidelines of some very serious meetings of very senior people. And all too often, I was the only one who was an Arab and or a Muslim. And we are talking about a region that is predominantly Arab and Muslim. But more importantly, values-aligned individuals who are dealing with the region, who genuinely care about the well-being of the people of the region as they cared about, obviously, our interests here in the US. And there is this perception that those are not always compatible. I disagree with that. I think morality is not negotiable. That it works one place, but it doesn't work in another place. Right is right, wrong is wrong. And I know in the days we live in, and the age we live in, sometimes that seems to be difficult to ascertain. But, you know, torturing people, mass sexual violence, dropping chemical weapons on children, making people disappear, is always going to be wrong, irrespective of the context, whether it's a mean or an end. But the reality that I witnessed is the people making these decisions not only don't physically represent the communities they are making decisions about, all too often their values are misaligned. And I was never a deep student of Edward Said, but I think he has a word for it: Orientalism. And in the kind of updated version of Orientalism that we are confronting is a new cadre of foreign policy thinkers within the Democratic and the Republican Party who truly don't identify with the people of the region as people who are worthy or capable of self-rule. And that if they are, bad things may happen. That's Orientalism, right? The United States has spent over $75 billion on Ukraine so far, according to Wikipedia. And I think it's a totally worthwhile effort. I just want to be very clear about that. Ukraine is a sovereign country that's been attacked illegally by its neighbor. And I do think the United States should stand with the Ukrainian people, full stop. But that same visceral identification and love for a people and their democracy doesn't extend to a region of 450 million people from Morocco to Iraq. And my only conclusion is simply because we have a lack of representation of values-aligned individuals making these decisions. And so what is the answer to that? And obviously there are other explanations. The people of the region have their own agency. We always forget that. When I was in government and now I'm running a political civic organization, people come to me and say, the US need to do, but remember, those countries have agency, whether it is governments or their people, and they have other priorities all too often, particularly the governments, some of them that were mentioned, and others, right? They have agency, and they know how to influence and shape the behavior of Western governments that have an electoral timetable, they have elections to win, and Orientalism in their heart. And so we should not underestimate that, and also the differing priorities within communities in the region and the diaspora. And something here I have witnessed and we have to address. When we say the Syrian people want to get rid of Assad, well, a lot of Syrian people want to get rid of Assad. Not all of them. Not all of them in Syria, and not all of them here in the US. Well, the Arab people want democracy. Well, a lot of Arab people want democracy, but not every Arab person wants democracy. In the diaspora here, there are Arab communities that actively support and promote various autocratic rulers for their own reasons. And then between communities, you also have issues, right? Some people like Hezbollah. Some people don't like it. Some people love Iran. Some people hate Iran. Yemen, right? The community is split. And so the Western policymakers see this, and they really don't see clear consensus from where they sit, and usually the people coming to them are not representative of the true sentiments of at least the people and the masses on the ground. They're meeting with rulers, they're meeting with lobbyists, and sometimes with a few well-meaning human rights activists. So all of that is shaping their thinking. Now I would say, I bring it back to people. If this person was a well-grounded, informed, read, traveled perhaps even a person from the region, or their heritage is from there, or they just identify with the real issues and understand the nuances, they're going to see all of these influences and still, I think, at the end of the day, try to do good by both America and the region. I know I did, and I feel miserably, but that's a separate issue. And so, how do we move from here? Really, if we're talking about should the United States do X, and why is authoritarianism bad for, not just the region, for America, by the way. It is bad for America. January 6th happened because of the war on terror. Donald Trump was elected because we did not do enough to help the Syrian people. And I'm happy to show you how we got from A to Z, but very quickly, the European migration crisis was caused by Vladimir Putin and Assad because they bombed Syria and nobody stopped them, right? That gave rise to right-wing politics in Europe, including Brexit and the empowerment of political right in places like Poland and Hungary and elsewhere. That was used by Trump here to win an election by promising to ban Muslims. That's what's undermining American democracy. And let alone a lot of legacy issues from war on terror, including secret evidence and rendition and all of that degraded our own democracy. What we can do about it here is really invest in a new cadre of policymakers and thinkers who are values aligned, who believe that what is good for America and the region is the same, and it needs to be centered on more democratic governance. Notice what I'm saying, democratic governance, not a full-fledged democracy, and respect for human rights. And that means leveraging our collective power in terms of money and votes when it comes to American elections, because that will have a direct impact on who gets hired in the campaigns and makes it to be the next senior official handling the Middle East for a future administration. I'm happy to continue the dialogue with you, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak to you.